Hey, welcome back to the A.C.E Football Academy. I am Coach Dunham, joined alongside Coach Hamilton. This is your Friday footy talk for March 7th. I don't even know what day it is anymore, Coach. Last couple weeks, we have talked about training sessions in general, preseason, in-season, things we're looking at. We're going to get a little more specific today and how we're setting up an individual practice session or training session, however you may want to pronounce it. We're not going to get into details of a specific training drill. More or less, when we're setting up our training sessions, what are we thinking about? Do we have a format? Do we have a certain system we want to go by? So we're going to delve into different areas of a training session and ways to properly develop our players. Coach, you're currently in the middle of your C license, so I'm sure you're just getting overloaded with all this type of stuff, setting up training sessions, season management, team management type of stuff. Anything you want to input here before we get started on the lines of what you learned so far on your C license?
Yeah, so I think specifically just to open our training sessions, there needs to be a method to our madness, right? Mm-hmm. So hopefully as coaches, and again, early on in the season, I love you mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about training. Early in the season, maybe you're doing some, hey, here's our attacking strategy, here's how we're going to defend, and so you're working through that, right? And it's kind of where we are right now in our season. However, as the season progresses, coaches should be looking at, I shouldn't say looking at game film because I know not everybody has that luxury. I'm lucky enough that I do have that luxury to go back and look at game film. Mm-hmm. You don't have that luxury,
right?
And so I think you have, and so you have to give it the eye test. You have to give it that. What are we doing well, and what are we not doing well on the attacking side and on the defending side, right? And so. That is where your training session should start. What do I need to improve on leading up to our next match day, right? And one of the things that I'm learning in the C license is you can't plug all the holes, right? You can't say, okay, we really struggled defensively doing this, but we didn't really break lines, so I'm going to plug that hole too. And now all of a sudden, I'm trying to plug all the holes and water's leaking out everywhere, right? So you have to focus on one area. And so U.S. Soccer has their player development framework that you can it is not something you have to be in a course for, right? You can go and get that and see it and use it. I would highly recommend that. It breaks it down by age group. So I think for me, how do I decide whether or not I want to focus on, let's just say I have an attacking issue and a defending issue, right? Ideally, according to U.S. Soccer, you don't want to focus on both of those in one session, right? You want to pick one. So how do you pick one, right? I think that depends. Did you lose the game 1-0? Or did you lose the game 6-0, right? So if I gave up 6 goals, for me as a coach, my look is probably going to be on the defensive end, right? I need to figure out what that defensive hole is. If I lost a game 1-0, then maybe I look at that attacking side and say, okay, next time can I draw that match 1-1, or could I win that match 2-1 by focusing on the attacking side of the ball? So where do you focus? I think that is up to you as a coach. I think what you focus on kind of comes down to really maybe even your philosophy as a coach, or how your last match went. What did you see? What did you feel? Where did things go wrong for you in that last match?
Yeah, and this is one of the first areas we want to really get into, because it's really the basis how you're setting up your practice sessions. What is your focus of that day? Just like you said, we got beat up 6-0. Well, Is our back line just not organized? Are they in the wrong position? Is our midfield never getting back? Is there no recovery runs happening? So there's a lot of things you've got to look at, and you having the ability to have film sessions is obviously an advantage that you can dig into. And I like that you pointed out, and I think this is something that you and I have talked about a lot. We've watched other coaches, is don't overcoach.
Yeah.
Don't focus on 5 different things in every single training session because they're not going to remember all of that. It's just not possible.
And that has been the big moment in the C license course, right? Especially at the youth level. And even at the youth level where I am, where my teams are good. like we, my teams are really, really solid, but we have multiple issues that we have to fix, right? To take that next step. And so one of the things that I've learned really early on is your focus area has to be a focus area, right? You can't fix even let's just say, okay, I want to focus on the attacking side of the ball, right? I can't focus. Why are we not finishing? Why can we not break the back line? And why do we have so much trouble building out of the back, right? I can't fix all 3 of those things in one session. They're all attacking issues, right? Mm-hmm. But I need to pick one of those. Where are we? What is hurting our game the most right now? And that's what I need to roll with into my week of. I mean, for most of us, I think we get 2 sessions, right? We get 2 training sessions. So that needs to be my focus heading into those 2 sessions.
Well, it's not just the overcoaching and trying, like you said, plug the holes. It's the language that we're focusing on as well in the training session. If you're talking about, we're talking about defending, so we're sticking that way. We're talking about body positioning. We're talking about how your feet are positioned, not square to them. You're off angle there, how you're approaching them. And if you stop talking about defending and go into your attacking style on the other side, now you're changing your language and you're getting away from discussing the defending technique and the defending organization that you're trying to get across to your kids during that session.
I'm so glad you brought this up because this was one of the big, we just had our in-person C license course, and you get mic'd up and you have to go and you have to coach a group of kids that you've never seen before, mm-hmm. right? And so one of the big things they harp on is, hey, we spent all day developing this attacking session or this defending session, right? We spent all day developing this defending session on our defensive shape, and you get into that session and you run it for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes, maybe even 15, 20, 25 minutes. And you notice your offense is just doing something wrong. What does every coach want to do? You want to go coach that offensive moment, right? You can't do that. Your focus has to be on whatever your game plan was going into that training. And I think that's really hard for all coaches, right? And it came up in the C license course that I'm in, where I'm doing this course with multiple college coaches. I'm doing this course with multiple girls and guys that are coaching at a high level. I feel like I'm coaching at a high level with my teams, but that is so hard. We're like, okay, my focus tonight is going to be on the defensive side of the ball. So I spend the first 10 minutes of practice talking about, cutting off the angles, and we talk about finding our shape and press and cover and balance and all those things, right? And in that first moment, I see that Chris isn't making that diagonal run that I want my wing to make. I can't go over and I can't stop training and coach Chris on that diagonal run, right? Because as much as I want him to make that run, that's not what my session is about. And I think that is so difficult. Now, some ways to combat that, right, is you have an assistant coach. So I go into my session and I say, hey, Chris, here's what we're doing tonight. You and I have built a session. You know that our focus is on offense or is on the defending side of the ball. But in that session, you're going to coach the offense, right? You're going, and we say coach, but the word they want us to use is you're going to manage the offense, right? So ultimately, what you want to have is in the previous game, whether you saw it on the eye test or you saw it on film, you have an undesired behavior that you want to fix. And that's what you go into your training. How can I fix this undesired behavior? So what's hard, I think what the hard part is that in your next training session, you have to produce that undesired behavior. And so that's when, am I going to have to go numbers up? Am I going to have to do a 5v7? Am I going to have to create something but you want to create that undesired behavior that I'm trying to fix. You also have to manifest that in your training sessions.
I agree with you 100%, Coach. Let's move on to another topic here. Later in the episode, we're going to talk about, do we have a format that we like to stick to? I want to discuss something that really isn't thought about, I think, is setting up your grids on the field. Typically, I know when you go through your E-license and your D-license, they kind of harp on setting everything up before your training starts. So you have a grid set up that's small, and then a larger grid, and then the largest grid for your scrimmage. So everything's already there. Or is there do you set up, I have a grid of my first training drill here, and then in this corner I have my second training drill here, and then if I have a third training drill, I got this, and then I've got the big box already set up once all this is done. Or I set up a grid, I tear it down, they go get water, I set up another grid. We do this training session, we pick it up, we get water, I set up another grid. What is your philosophy on that approach to setting up the grids during the training sessions, and have you found something to be more beneficial than the other?
Yeah, I think this is going to lead into something that you want to talk about later. However, I think the most important factor in the question you just asked is, what kind of space am I working with? Mm-hmm. Am I sharing a field with you? Am I sharing a field with the 2013 boys? Or do I have the whole field to myself?
Let's say for this instance, you got half the field because somebody's on the other half.
Okay. So then in that case, and this is something that I haven't normally done. So a lot of the things that you're hearing tonight are things that I am learning on the fly, right? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a full-size pitch going east and west on the half I have, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to mark out my 18. I'm going to, use the sidelines. And, of course, it's going to be condensed, obviously. But one of the things I'm doing is I am giving the players that visual of, here's our full side field, right? Mm-hmm. And then I personally like to run it where I can set up everything and then I can take things away as we move, right? So we start small, I take the small away, we get a little bigger. Right. I take the medium away, and now we're, quote unquote, full sided for us. I think it also depends on your session, and we're going to get into what sessions might look like. And so I think this changed your question. And I know I'm going to all kinds of places here. That's where my brain is right now with this. Like, there's so much information.
There's a lot. Yeah.
That it is, and so much of it is just a night by night situation, mm-hmm. right? So ideally, I'm going to be able to set up my session and not have to use water breaks to build a grid or whatever. Now, is that always possible? Of course not. But for me in my trainings, I want to use my water breaks to discuss with my assistant coach. Hey, what do we think? B, discuss with my players. Get feedback, get that real time feedback with your players. Or C, use that water break to build those relationships that we talked about, right? So hey, everybody go get water. You're the first back out on the field, and I can just say, hey man, what was the best part of your day today? And you hit me with something something off the wall, right? And so I think ideally, if I had my way, I would be able to set up my whole session and then pull it apart as I went.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And just like you said, you can't always set everything up from small out to large for every practice, just because things don't always work out that way. One thing I want to add to this that could make things a little bit easier is different colored cones.
Yeah.
It's such a simple concept where your first session, hey, we're using the red cones for this. I got the box set up. You're going to do 5E2, get it going. Here we go. All right, pick up the red cones, bring them to me, please. We're now going to be using the blue cones. Blue cones is for the bigger,
Yeah.
Second training session of positional play, possession play. It's a little bit bigger box. We're going to do 4v4 plus neutrals or whatever it may be. And now we're going to pick up the blue cones. Final session, we're going to do a 4v4 scrimmage. Orange cones, we're going to lock out your grids. Here's your vest. Let's get rocking.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is something I learned from you when I was your assistant at Central. And it's just something, normally you go buy cones, they're orange, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're all, you can buy whatever color cones you want. And that is, for the coaches that are listening, that is worth the investment, is having 12, a set of 12 cones of 4 different colors, right? So 36 cones, you got 12, and they're all different colors. I think that is really worth the investment for what you just hinted at.
And when you explain that to the kids, they can see, all right, I got reds.
Yeah.
Oh, I got the box. Okay, I got it. Instead of having an orange one and a faded orange, and you got a couple reds over it reduces the confusion of what box you want them to play in when you've got everything set up at one time.
Well, and you can I even use them now where if I'm doing let's just say like a build out rondo or a build, building out of the back, hey, my center back and my striker, you're confined to the yellow zone. But my center mid or my holding mid, you can go yellow or orange, right? So I build my zones even with those different colored cones to apply constraints, apply restrictions, apply rules that I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later. But I think that is such a simple concept that is often overlooked.
Again, this is the A.C.E Football Academy. This is your Friday Footy Talk. I am Coach Dunham, joined alongside Coach Hamilton. Coach, we've got a lot of bits on our notes here we want to get into. We're probably going to have a continuation in next week's Friday Footy Talk. I really want to dig into, because I think it follows on what we'll be getting into already, is a format, an overall format of each training session. And I think this is where you and I really differ. And we were discussing this off camera, where, when do you really focus on your technical training, getting that first touch, getting those passing drills going in? Do you focus on just the training session where everybody's got a ball? Or are you getting everybody moving in some kind of game phase? So I'm going to post the question of, what is your typical format? And do you have a certain rhythm that you go by of, every practice I've got to have an A, I'm going to have a B, or I'm going to end in a C every single practice?
I do. So when we get into normal training, I'm going to assume I'm going to get 90 minutes. And so I'm going to take 10 of those minutes and get rid of them for a warm up, a stretch, and a cool down, right? So you're giving me 80 minutes to train. I'm going to spend the first 20 minutes on those, excuse me, I can't talk, with a traditional technical training. And if my C license courses or instructors are listening to this, they are not going to like that. But as a club, for us where we coach, and maybe you'll differ, but that's where we struggle. We are so behind technically that sometimes it doesn't matter how good we are tactically, because we can't take a first touch without giving it away, right? And so I spend the first 20 minutes in everybody has a ball, or you and I are working as partners, maybe a group of 3 at most, and we're doing a technical first touch, ball out of the air, whatever it is, right? Dribbling, passing, whatever it is, but we are spending 20 minutes on that. And then I get into I guess now it's old school play, practice, play, where we're going to play for about 15 or 20 minutes. And in that first play, now, when I say play, it might not be your typical like lineup and we're going to scrimmage. It may be, and we'll get into this next week, I'm sure, but it may be some, I'm going to throw a term at people that they're not going to understand. So you're going to have to listen next week. The modified game form where maybe I have multiple goals or whatever it is. But in that first 20 minutes, I'm doing very little coaching, but I am using the terminology and the vocabulary that I am wanting to hit on that practice. We've been talking about the defending side of the ball. So while they're playing, I'm not stopping the play. I'm not interrupting the play, but I am constantly using, hey, are we balanced? Hey, back line, are we balanced? Hey, do I have my pressure cover? All those types of things, right? So I'm using that terminology. Then we're going to take a water break. And again, instead of setting up cones during the water break, I want to be able to go over while they're drinking water and for me to be able to say, hey, what words did you hear me say 94 times in the last 20 minutes? And they're like, oh my gosh, you said balance, you said pressure, you said cover, right?
And you see
And
the
so,
1,000 eye rolls.
Yeah, and so those are the conversations we're having. And then we're going to get into the train, right? I said play, practice, play earlier. I meant play, train, play.
There you go.
Then we're going to get into the train and where I'm really going to show them what I want, what I'm talking about, where we struggled the last game. And then the final play is as full-sided as I can get. Unfortunately for me, that's usually about a 9v9 if everybody's there, and then I can step in and play. And then you're hoping that through your first play, through your train, in that final play, you're going to see those things that you've been harping on all practice.
Yeah, and in the past, mainly when I was back doing the high school ball, and I think one thing we haven't brought up here, which we could discuss next week, is the age level.
Yeah.
Definitely has an impact on what you're doing here. So I think the technical side of that definitely needs to happen for like your 10 years and under, and that's so important to get them comfortable with the ball. For me, I used to do the technical training type of stuff when I was in high school, but I started to realize a lot of kids are standing or they're doing some walking with the ball at their foot, and the touches on the ball are invaluable, and there's no getting around that. However, I have changed the way I run my practices here over the last couple of years, and I will start every practice up with, again, we're focused on getting touches on the ball, but we're getting touches on the ball with a little bit of pressure on you. I'm doing a 3v1. I'm doing a 4v1, a 5v2, maybe even a 6v3, depending on my numbers, whatever it may be. And I'm varying the size of the box, I'm varying touches. So everything in that very first drill, I'm getting them activated and ready for the practice session. And we're going over the stuff that you've already discussed. Opening your body up, locking your ankle, see it happens, get on your toes. Don't stand there, move every time there's a pass. We're getting soccer ready under pressure. And I don't always start off with the rondo. Sometimes I may do juggling, where they're working on the touch on the ball in a different style. It could be, this is a juggling game that you and I love to do that we learned from a previous
Trip Rogers.
Shout out to him in Center College. But you give them sequences. They have a partner. You give them sequences they got to do, like head catch, volley catch, or you mix things up. I know just the other week, I had the girls do 2-touch, 1-touch catch. So now they're getting in a different sequence here. And now we're working on the value of juggling isn't just I'm getting 10 and 15 juggles in the air. It's the touch and the contact with your foot, but also the weight that you're putting into the ball.
Yeah.
Is it staying at knee height? Is it going all the way up to your head? Is it going above your head? All of that is invaluable once you're in the game of soccer. So now we're activated. The next format I'm getting into is I'm either doing a positional session or a possession session.
Before you get into what those look like for you, how do you decide what you're going to do? How do you decide, okay, tonight I'm going to do positional or tonight I'm going to do possess? Like Or is there a decision for you, or is it just like a rotating thing?
Yeah, I think if we're doing 2 practices a week, I'm probably alternating.
Okay.
More than likely, I'm alternating. What is the difference there? Possession is just that. I'm just working on, can I get 5 consecutive passes against the other team? Or am I limiting touches? Am I changing the size of the box? Positional is you're using the possession game, but you have people in positional areas in your box, and you're pointing that out. Hey, this neutral is your center back. This neutral is your center mid. That neutral is your forward. Think about that when you're playing either a 4v4 plus 3 or 3v3 plus 3, whatever it may be, and you're focusing on where you're on that field on a smaller scale of that game. And then after that, you're getting into your gameplay, your scrimmages, whether it's going to be a 4v4, a 3v3, 5v5. I know just the other week, I had the big goal set up 30 yards apart. It was a 5v5, and the whole day we were working on attacking and the attacking third. And I said, I want a shot every 15 seconds. And we're working on possession and shooting. There wasn't really positions in that situation.
Right.
But we are scrimmaging. And so my scrimmages aren't necessarily full-size field, half-size field. It could be manipulated in some way, but it's focused on what we've done up to that point. And so that's kind of my format is we're always playing soccer with pressure. We're focusing on our positions and our possession. And then we're ending that with a scrimmage focused on what we've done throughout the day.
I think our similarities there is that we both want to end with that game format, right? And we're going to get into that next week a little bit, but we both want to end with that game format where they are playing the game of soccer. I think we're both pretty similar in that middle section of our practice.
Oh, for sure.
Where we are focusing on whatever we feel like we need to focus on. For you, it's, maybe positional, it may be possessional. For me, it may be more of a area of the game, like, okay, we can't get into the attacking third or whatever it is, right? So, but I do think we're similar yet different. And I think that is, but I think that's okay. I think that's what makes soccer great, right? There is no, and I've told you this many times. When I did my D license, it was, hey, we're going to do, and I'm going to use the word practice because it's the word they use, although I'm not going to use it anymore. They harped on the practice, play, right?
Yeah. In
my C license, it's just kind of, they don't harp on that, right? They don't ask you to run it that way. They trust you as a coach to kind of figure it out, what works best for your team.
Yeah.
And I think that's what both you and I are saying here. There are multiple formats you can do. Now, I am looking forward to next week's conversation where we can get into the 3 different types of format and when they should be used, how they should be used. But I think that for new coaches, for rec coaches, the important takeaways here is that they need to be playing as much as possible.
Yeah. And the reasoning behind that is you have to get them in a game situation, not just, training situations. It's got to be legitimately a game situation where they have, a position, they have a role in that game, and they're learning to develop critical thinking, they develop decision-making, problem-solving skills in those moments. And all of that builds up into that, but you're also building that competitive edge. Now you've got a game where you're scoring goals, you're getting points involved, and
I'm gonna write this down because we're gonna have to talk about this next week.
Anyway, Coach, I think this has been a great session. We will undoubtedly continue this practice setup session in next week's Friday Footy Talk, Coach. We have so much more to get into as far as how practice sessions are set up. You and I, even though we have some differences, we have a lot of similarities. And like we said 1,000 times before, there's no wrong way or right way to run your practice session as long as they're playing and learning and having a good time.
There it is.
That is the biggest thing. and making sure they're getting a quality session each week. I'm Coach Dunham. This is Coach Hamilton. We are the Ace Football Academy. Go kick some ace.